Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of The Learning Curve, our new podcast put on by the Assessment and Reporting team. I am Julia McLeod, and I will be your host. Today, we're recording from our brand new studios here at Lumen Christi, our common home in Edmonton Catholic Schools. The title for this episode is Charting a Path to Outcomes-Based Assessment and Reporting. In this episode, we will explore the history of OBAR, or Outcomes-Based Assessment and Reporting, in Edmonton Catholic Schools. We'll look to the past to understand how we have come to where we are today in the present, and consider a path forward for the future. Our agenda for the episode kicks off with a segment called TSA, Tricky Situations in Assessment, with Nicole Lafrenière, our Director of Curriculum and Assessment. In this segment, Nicole will help us navigate and land on solutions to difficult situations in assessment that our teachers may be experiencing. Following this segment, we will have an interview with Jennifer Espejo Harasimiuk, another one of our assessment and reporting consultants here at Learning Services. Jennifer has been working in the role for the past 4 years and can provide some insight into the history of OBAR in Edmonton Catholic Schools. Then we're going to finish off with a segment with our Deputy Superintendent, Tim Cusack, called We're Still Doing That? Tim will explore outdated assessment practices and offer solutions to help us move forward in good pedagogy. Well, that's the plan for today. Let's jump right in.
You're an experienced teacher, but you've been asked 2 weeks before school starts to teach Math 9. You've never taught the course before, and the previous teacher left no resources. The school you're at doesn't even have textbooks. How do you approach planning for this course, and what do you prioritize knowing that you won't be able to do it all?
All of us have been in this position before where we're asked to teach something that we have no background in. In the case of a course where I have had no experience, well, let's be honest, even in the case of a course where I do have experience, I'm going to start with the program of studies. I'm going to look at that program of studies and I'm going to say, what is it about this program of studies that I'm already really confident in? What is it that I don't know? So in Math 9, I'm going to tell you right now that I am not confident in circle geometry. That's an area that I'm going to need some help. There are other areas that I feel already pretty confident in, but I'm going to begin with that program of studies, do a little self-assessment. Then I'm going to look on SharePoint and I'm going to say, what exists here? There's a pacing guide. Oh, and that pacing guide aligns with K&E. It aligns with scaffolds. So I get a real sense of where were kids before, where do they need to go after. I start to learn a little bit more about the program. Then I'm going to talk to my principal. I'm going to talk to staff at my site. I'm going to say, okay, so I know that there's no textbooks here, but what has been used before? We have lots of new schools who don't necessarily have textbooks, but maybe I can scrounge one from somewhere. I've got a colleague from another school, and it'll at least give me a bit of a starting point. And then I'm also going to say, do we have any experienced teachers here at this school? A math lead teacher, somebody that I can ask some questions of so I can start pulling together resources. What do I need to create? What can I find? What really gets to the heart of these outcomes? How do I structure my year in an appropriate way using that pacing guide for additional assistance? And then I might sit down with my math consultant. So I'm going to sit down with Darren and Connor and I'm going to say, I'm going to need a little bit of help with some of these things. How do I prioritize these outcomes? What do kids really need to know for Math 10C? How can I make sure that I'm setting my year up for success? I know that I'm not going to be able to perhaps cover everything in as much detail as an experienced teacher, but nonetheless, I need to make sure that I'm covering all of the program of studies. That's my responsibility as a teacher. So help me, math consultant, make this the best possible that I can. I know that one strategy that I used when I ended up having to teach math in the past was leveraging the help of an experienced teacher at my site, where I would go and watch them teach something. In that case, I was teaching Math 7. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to explain integers. I watched him do it, and then I had him watch me do it. That was an effective way of making sure that I understood what the topic was and that I could explain it in a way that kids could get and get a little bit of feedback at the same time. So I think that all of those different strategies together will make for a successful year.
Can you give us a quick history of assessment and reporting in ECSD, junior and senior high schools?
Absolutely. So in the past, assessment and reporting in our secondary schools here in Edmonton Catholic Schools has followed a pretty traditional method. So using points and percentages, calculating grades that way. And this is seen all over the world. So it is quite traditional. And our junior high teachers took it a step further. So not only did they do points and percentages, they were also looking at the individual outcomes from the program of studies. So that's our curriculum here in Alberta. And they are putting on levels of achievement to indicate quality of work, as well as doing points and percentages. So in the past, that was done in 2 separate programs. Now that we have Power Teacher Pro, that was brought into Edmonton Catholic Schools about 6 years ago now. Now that's streamlining the process for them, because both that outcomes-based reporting and the traditional reporting are in one program. And with the advent of Power Teacher Pro, our high school teachers are using it in the same way that they were using their previous grade book. But what we've seen is that there's quite a discrepancy between school awarded marks and how students are performing on our provincial standardized tests, like the provincial achievement exam and the diploma exam. And so what Edmonton Catholic Schools is looking into is outcomes-based assessment and reporting to help narrow those gaps, to really pinpoint where it is that our students are struggling with performing well. And you know, it's come a long way since at least when I started here in this role. And it's really interesting to see all the different creative ways that our teachers are doing this.
Yeah, you said that you've come a long way, and it sounds like we've come a long way and that we're well on our way towards outcomes-based assessment and reporting. For our listeners, can you tell us more about the difference between outcomes-based assessment and traditional assessment methods?
So traditional methods would be more about completion and getting all the right answers and counting up how many right answers you have compared to how many answers you could have gotten right. It's a lot to do with ranking and sorting students as well. And these practices stem from hundreds of years ago with the advent of more people going into formalized education outside of the home. Whereas outcomes-based assessment and reporting, it shifts the focus towards learning a lot more. So the students' understanding and mastery of specific standards, rather than I completed this assignment, that assignment, and the like. And it's not focused really on behavior unless that behavior is part of the curriculum, it's part of the standards or the outcomes. And with that focus on learning, then it also comes clarity on those expectations for learning. So those outcomes are clearly defined, and students better understand what they need to learn in order to achieve. And it also makes it very clear how are they going to be evaluated. And OBA is very much evidence-based, so it's not restricted to, a few products at the end of a unit, let's say, where you have a unit exam. It's looking at a whole body of evidence of learning. So multiple sources, conversations, observations, in addition to those products. And with that body of evidence naturally comes feedback. So as students are demonstrating to their teacher, doing the process of learning, their teacher is able to provide actionable feedback that is in line with what those expectations are. So it's very, very clear. And I would say too that it really has a lot to do with this whole idea of growth mindset. There's a lot of situations where you see we talk about the growth mindset, but we're not actually living it. And that's hard to do, to change that kind of mindset. So growth mindset is, okay, this is where I am. This is where I need to be. What are all the things that I can do to get to where I need to be? And because of that, it's really consistent. So in traditional systems, we have, I would like to be in, Mrs. McLeod's class because, she's a fun teacher and she's an easy teacher. And I know I'm going to do well in Mrs. McLeod's class. But in Mrs. H's class, not so much. She's a hard worker or a hard marker, pardon me, with that OBA. Then we get more consistency because the teachers can agree on what are those expectations. What does quality look like? Most of our teachers in Edmonton Catholic Schools fall somewhere along the middle, somewhere along there, some closer to traditional than others, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a much more well-rounded approach to evaluating student learning. Thinking back on my own experiences in the classroom, I resonate with the point you made on evidence-based. So just trying to make sure that I'm collecting different data points of my student learning and then making sure that that's well-rounded, well-balanced for evaluating where they actually are at in their learning. So on this note, I'm certain our listeners would like to hear some practical tips and tricks. Can you give us some examples of how outcomes-based assessment is being put into practice in Edmonton Catholic Schools?
Well, I have my list right here. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that are at the forefront of my mind right now. So the first one is simply reducing the number of repetitive tasks. So, and increasing the number of opportunities to revise that which a student has already demonstrated. And so this is kind of an example of a reassessment, and it's showing students, you maybe didn't get proficient on this essay. You only received a satisfactory. Well, now they have a chance to really hone in on where they needed to grow there. So that's one example. Another example is we've got at least 2 teachers right now. They're actively making class less about the myth of rigor and more about this whole idea of collaborative learning, and it's not over till it's over. So one example is having 2-stage exams. So you start by yourself, you write your test, and then the teacher takes it in and they mark the test, but they don't mark up the test. They just keep track of where they were. Then the students the next day sit in groups. They can choose their groups and they compare answers without knowing who got what right or wrong. And then they can change their answers as they talk to each other about it. And then the teacher marks it again. And then they blend those 2 marks together. And that's really helping them learn. And another teacher just got to see, he has redacted quizzes. So the students are able to preview the quiz with all the numbers in the questions. This is a physics class. All the numbers in the questions blanked out. And the students get to discuss the strategies that they would use to do it first. And then after a few minutes, 10 minutes usually, he takes those quizzes down. Everybody goes to sit down and then they write their quizzes individually. So that's one. If I think about triangulating evidence of learning, I have a lot of examples. Rather than determining grades based on like limited evidence or discrete written products, there could be evidence from observational checklists as well. So I know in one of our ESL designates classrooms, she really focuses on the speaking part. She believes in using research-backed methods and how speaking helps to learn a language best. And another one of our science teachers uses observational checklists during the labs. She does performance exams. Another one with teacher clarity, one of our teachers is very clear with what are the success criteria for their learning, the students' learning. And so all of this coming together provides the teacher with that evidence of learning so that grades can be more than just some sort of calculation that a grade book does for them. It's more about determining what is that comprehensive body of evidence, and then they can decide and exercise their professional judgment what good learning looks like.
Yeah, well, I love hearing about real life examples. I think teachers are quite familiar with observational checklists, but that idea of redacted quizzes and redacted exams, that's new to me, and I think it's a forward thinking way to use traditional methods like tests and quizzes in the classroom. So you've got my mind spinning with ideas that I'd love to try in the classroom. But now I'm wondering, how does outcomes-based assessment benefit students in terms of accurately reflecting their learning and helping them reach their full potential?
Well, there's a ton of research behind this right now, and really most of the research says pretty much the same thing. So if I think about how Tom Schimmer is one of the authors who supported us, and he's Canadian, and he is an educator in BC, and he argues that standards-based grading, that's what he calls it, outcomes-based assessment, provides a more accurate and meaningful picture of what students know and understand and can do because of that clarity piece. We have other researchers, mostly Tom Guskey at this point, talks about providing that clear and timely feedback and how it's actionable because it is so clear. Clear seems to be the word of the day. And of course, we all have lots of other research supporting that this enhances student motivation, their ability to own their own learning, and they're focused on the learning. They're focused on progress rather than just getting a really high grades. They know they will get the grade if they demonstrate the learning. And that's what they're focused on.
Wow.
Takes away a lot of stress.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a moment for a fun little segment we call We're Still Doing That with Tim Cusack.
What? Are we still doing that? Stop it. Look, it's really important to design learning tasks that are mapped to the program of study. Full stop. When you're building a house, there's a blueprint, there's a plan. You can design what room is where and where the stairs and how you're scaffolding and leading to different areas of whatever you're building or creating. Lesson design should be something that you are doing robustly and meaningfully. Hey, if we're relying on teachers pay teachers or somebody else to create a learning task, that might not be articulated to our outcomes in our program of studies. So it's very important to look at the outcome, look at the learning task that you're creating, and there needs to be that handshake of, is the task I've created, is it really accessing those outcomes and making those outcomes visible to the students? And then as the teacher, it's very important to understand, how am I differentiating that? How might I scaffold that or extend the learning for those students seeking additional challenge? How can I look at additional supports, or in some cases, adapting or modifying the work to meet the level of meeting the learners where they're at? But nonetheless, the program of studies is the program of study. And we have to make sure that what we're doing is congruent with how we are bringing those concepts alive, that our lesson design really exemplifies, not just through the content, which is the important part. The content is often the vehicle, but the destination is really the outcomes in the program of study. So as a teachers, we need to do our own driving. That doesn't mean we're not having great conversations or carpool karaoke about what's a great way to design something that we can work on a common assessment. Brilliant. But I think it's important that we're designing our own instruction geared to our own learners and meeting them where they're at with our program of study. What do you think?
back. Before we heard from Tim, Jen was sharing the benefits of OBAR for students. Ultimately, what students will know where they're going in their learning, how they're going to get there, and when they've achieved the learning goal. With any major change, there are always challenges to overcome. Can you share some of the challenges you've seen in moving towards outcomes-based assessment and reporting?
Yes, first and foremost, change management. Change management needs to be done very carefully. And starting with change management has to start with a very clear and concise vision. Being in this role for a few years now, I've certainly seen what happens when the vision isn't as clear as maybe it could have been. And we also need to make sure that we're involving our key interested parties, right? So not just, people who are administrators or department heads. It should be all of the teachers. It should be the students, involve everyone there, especially with planning and implementation and receiving feedback from these interested parties to do that. And it really does make a difference to have a very strong team, a cohesive team that of change makers that are going to help this move forward. It takes time to plan, communicate, bring on that vision, and when we can involve our interested parties, all the people involved, then it's easier to get the buy-in as well. We really do need to recognize that we exist within a provincial education system. So this is really a buy-in challenge. We're thinking about teachers who rightfully ask the question, why would I change to this outcomes-based assessment thing when the government says I have to report a percentage anyway? What's the point? And so we really have to think about even though the percentage needs to be reported as a single grade, how can we maybe leave that part for the end, right? And really leverage the learning enhancements that can come with outcomes-based assessment and reporting. The next part that would be a challenge is making sure we're all on the same page in terms of what is a fair and consistent grading system. If anyone's been in a school for any amount of time, sometimes it can be difficult just to get consensus on where we should put the coffee maker, right? So consensus on something like this, it can be really tricky. And we have some very passionate, knowledgeable, and skilled teachers with lots of different perspectives. So we need to be able to have systems for examining students' samples of work and deciding what does quality look like at each level. And we really need to make sure that we all agree on the purpose for the course, let's say. So, a couple of our consultants right now are, 3 of them, our humanities consultants now, are working on examining student samples of writing and deciding where does that fall in the levels that we're using to show students how far are you from the target and what do you need to do. And that part's really quite important. And then also aligning assessments with outcomes. So many of our teachers will call that blueprinting. And blueprinting is very important. It's very analytical and technical, but it's not just assessments that students are writing on, like a multiple choice test. It really also you need to align your instruction, the questions that you're asking in class. And most of our academic core teachers are rather skilled at this, especially at the high school level, because they feel that kind of guiding pressure's not my favorite word, but that guiding force, let's say, from the diploma exams. And learning how to do that well takes time and support and collaboration, and then actually doing it well also takes time. So this I don't think aligning assessments with outcomes is a buy-in challenge so much as a time challenge for sure. But a major buy-in challenge would be parents and students. Getting our parents and students on board. If we think about it, most adults, how were they assessed most recently in their lives in school? With a percentage grade or a single letter grade. And especially our most successful adults, parents, families, they're thinking, well, it worked for me. Why would we change it? Don't change it. You're going to hurt my kids' chances of getting into the post-secondary institution they want. And for a lot of students, they find comfort in the traditional system where if I follow the rules and I am compliant with my teacher, I'm going to get the grades. And so it is quite a shift there. So the challenge there is making sure that our parents, families, and students are informed and understand why, and that really we've got them. We're not going to let them fail. If you learn, you will get the grade. That's a big challenge there.
Yeah, that challenge just levels up the need for parent communication and student communication, and involving parents really in the community that is education. So of all these challenges that exist moving towards OBAR, can you suggest a path forward for schools?
Absolutely. First of all, be really clear. Start with clear goals. Know your why right away, and then involve your invested parties, parents, families, students, administrators, teachers, everybody. Involve them all, get their input, and then really leverage the collective efficacy of your early adopters. So what I mean by that is if we've got teachers in the building who are like, yes, I'm ready, I want to do this thing, give them as much support as we can as they do that. Give them the leeway. So one of our teachers that I spoke of before, where she's allowing multiple revisions, she had her whole proposal written up, and it was crucial that her administrative team and her department head did not shut her down. They supported her. They invited her to think about different ways to do that. And because of this, now she's experiencing success, and her colleagues and the students of her colleagues are seeing this, and they're wondering, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder how that could work for me. And so with that also comes professional development as well. So we need to make sure that our teachers understand the why and even somehow the principles behind these ideas. And, once we've got those early adopters and that professional development, then provide our teacher teams time for collaborative inquiry, work together and ask the right questions and test things out and really evaluate. The whole idea of know thy impact is going to be very important as we move forward with this, to see what works and what doesn't. And there's always a little bit of worry, well, what if it doesn't work at all? And sometimes it's a situation where you just want to kind of back off and be like, I'm done, I'm not doing that anymore. The leaders in the school or the colleagues in the school, it's okay to encourage. That's okay, it's only your first try. Let's try again. Really, that sort of support there, and then again, do a lot of work to align those assessments with those outcomes, and really focus on formative assessment. That feedback is huge, because that is what gets that growth mindset. It's what helps close those gaps. Again, I think I said it before, clear expectations. Clarity is going to be a really big deal. And then evaluate and adjust, monitor and adjust. If things aren't working, you've tried it a couple of times, you've invited someone to, observe or bounce ideas off of, and it's just not working for you. Okay, make an adjustment. That's okay. That's not failing. That's learning. And we're all learning.
We're now at the end of the episode. But before we sign off, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Jennifer Espejo Harasimiuk for her insights into the history of OBA and ECSD and lighting a path forward for us. Thank you again to both Nicole, Lafrenière, and Tim Cusack for their segments. And last but not least, to you, our listeners, thank you for tuning in to our very first episode of The Learning Curve. We will be releasing episodes bi-weekly, with each episode featuring different voices and perspectives. Please like and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with each release. In the meantime, follow us on Instagram at ECSD Learning, our YouTube channel, Teaching Mama 2001, and check out our many resources on our SharePoint site, bit.ly Assessment ECSD. All 3 links are in the episode description. Lastly, we want to hear from you, both on Spotify and on our Instagram. we are inviting you to share your classroom experiences in assessment. This week's prompt is to share an assessment strategy that you currently use. Moving forward, we will feature our listeners in the conclusion of each episode. Help us celebrate you. That's our time. See you next week on the Learning Curve.